Welcome to From Dorms to Desks, job hunting tips for those early in their careers, a podcast brought to you by College Recruiter job search site, which believes that every student and recent grad deserves a great career, and hosted by Work Defined. Join our AI co-hosts as they dive into tips, tricks, and insights that will help you land your next part-time, seasonal, internship, or entry-level job. Let's get your career started.
You know, usually when we talk about a medical diagnosis, there's this expectation of extreme precision.
Oh, absolutely.
It feels very much like engineering, right? You break your arm, the x-ray shows that jagged white line, and the doctor just points to the film and says, there it is.
Yeah, it's completely binary. The bone is either fractured or, well, it isn't. And as humans, we kind of crave that level of visible categorization. We want a clear map of the problem so we can apply a really clear linear solution.
Right, exactly. But then, and this is what's so wild, you step into the world of early career development, specifically this massive debate around where we actually do our work, and suddenly that x-ray machine is just completely broken.
Well, shattered. The professional landscape right now is incredibly murky.
It really is. If you were staring at two different job offers right now, fresh out of college with a crisp new degree, the map is anything but clear. On one hand, you have an offer that lets you, work from your couch, in your favorite sweatpants, avoiding the morning rush hour traffic entirely. Right. But then on the other hand, you have an offer that demands you put on hard pants, pack a lunch, and commute into a physical building.
And this isn't just a minor lifestyle preference anymore. I mean, it is a fundamental divergence in how we structure the on-ramp for the modern workforce.
Yeah.
The internet is entirely polarized on this. Half the commentators out there argue that the traditional office is a dinosaur, while the other half, they insist that remote early career workers are completely disconnected and essentially stalling their development.
Which is why we're here. Today, our goal is to cut straight through that noise. We are taking a deep dive into an incredibly detailed exploration of early career work models. And we're doing this as a special crossover, specifically adopting the framing of an episode of the High Volume Hiring podcast by College Recruiter, diving exclusively into their recent deep dive article on this exact topic.
It's a fantastic lens to view this through. We're looking at the data, the expert insights, and the actual real-world outcomes of these differing environments, especially when it comes to high-volume hiring and talent acquisition.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the core dilemma is something that feels very personal to anyone trying to navigate their first few years in any industry. And what strikes me immediately from our source material is the assertion that the where of your first job actually matters just as much as the what. It's not just about commute time.
What's fascinating here is that this isn't a one-size-fits-all answer. It's a deeply strategic choice. The physical or digital location of your early career dictates how you learn the unwritten rules of professional life.
The unwritten rules, yeah.
Exactly. It shapes the network of people who actually recognize your face and your work ethic. So if we look at the argument for the traditional physical office first, we need to establish what I would call the baseline of faster maturity.
Okay, faster maturity.
Right. And Nick Nisimoff, the founder of First HR, he presents a fairly uncompromising stance on this. He argues that when you are just starting out, the absolute most valuable thing you can gain is not technical skill.
Wait, really? Let's test that premise because that sounds completely counterintuitive to me.
I know it does.
I mean, if you just spent 4 years in university or, a specialized boot camp, learning a very specific technical skill, let's say Python programming or financial modeling, isn't your first job entirely about proving and refining that exact technical skill?
That is the assumption most new grads make. And it's exactly what Anisimov is challenging. His point is that the real learning happens in everything that surrounds the technical execution.
The soft skills.
The soft skills, yes.
Mm-hmm.
How do you communicate with a team that is running behind deadline and deeply frustrated? How do you read the micro-expressions in a room during a tense budget meeting?
Oh, that's tough to do on Zoom.
Exactly. How do you navigate a professional disagreement without burning a bridge? He argues that these nuanced human interactions are fundamentally tied to physical presence. You just can't master them through a screen.
He actually phrases it quite bluntly in the article. He says, comfort is not what you need right now. Growth is.
Which is a direct challenge to the appeal of the remote work lifestyle. I mean, he's pointing out that a junior employee working from their living room mostly just sees tasks on a screen.
Right.
They join scheduled video calls, they execute the task, and they log off. but they miss the entire connective tissue of the organizational culture. They miss the in-between moments.
Like the moments before the host clicks start recording on the Zoom call, so to speak?
Precisely. They don't hear the senior colleague taking a deep breath and deliberately lowering their voice to de-escalate an angry client on the phone. They don't witness the quick, informal three-person huddle by the coffee machine where the actual strategic pivot is decided before the formal meeting even begins.
So you're missing the context.
You're missing all of it. Without that exposure, you might become incredibly proficient at your technical tasks, sure, but you remain professionally underdeveloped. You just don't learn how the machine actually operates.
Okay, I can see the argument for soft skills requiring physical presence. But the data in our sources doesn't just stop at soft skills. There's a fascinating statistic here about technical acceleration in the office.
Yes, the 40% boost.
Yeah, let's talk about that. Shahar Yar, the CEO of Software House, he's managed teams across fully remote, hybrid, and fully in-person models. He tracked the data and found that junior developers who started in an office learned coding patterns, debugging techniques, and client communication skills roughly 40% faster than their fully remote counterparts.
40% is not a marginal difference. That is a massive acceleration in competency.
It's huge.
It's the difference between taking a full year to become a productive independent contributor versus taking, 8 months?
Right. And Yar attributes this to learning through osmosis. And the primary mechanism he points to for this 40% speed boost is simply the ability to tap a senior developer on the shoulder, getting unstuck in 2 minutes rather than waiting an hour for a Slack response.
Let's look at the psychology of that specific interaction, because I think it reveals a lot about the friction of remote work for juniors. Imagine you are 2 weeks into your first remote job.
Okay.
You hit a bug in your code, or you don't understand a piece of a project brief. What is the psychological barrier to sending a digital message to a senior colleague?
Oh, it's terrifying. You do not want to seem incompetent. I mean, I remember doing this. You end up spending 30 minutes drafting, deleting, and redrafting a simple Slack message just to make sure you don't sound stupid.
Exactly. And while you were doing that, you were completely blocked. You were losing momentum.
Well,
Then you send the message and, you wait. You don't know if the senior colleague is in a meeting, at lunch, or just ignoring you. The anxiety builds.
it really does.
But in a physical office, you can literally look across the desk. You can see if the senior developer has their headphones on and is deep in a flow state, or if they're just leaning back, sipping coffee, staring into space.
You can read the room.
Yes. The friction required to ask a quick, clarifying question drops to near zero. And that immediate relief from confusion builds a junior employee's confidence incredibly fast.
Okay, but I have to genuinely challenge this dynamic. Let's look at it from the perspective of the broader company. Yor says tapping a senior dev on the shoulder makes the junior learn 40% faster. But aren't we just shifting the unproductivity around?
How so?
Well, you're unblocking the junior, absolutely. But you are constantly interrupting the senior developer's flow state. Every time they get tapped on the shoulder, it takes them, 15 minutes to regain their deep focus? Is the office basically just an extremely expensive, exhausting training simulator where the seniors sacrifice their productivity to handhold the grads?
That is the exact trade-off organizations have to calculate, especially in high-volume hiring environments.
Yeah.
Yes, there is a short-term productivity tax on your senior staff.
Right.
But the argument is that the long-term payoff, getting a cohort of 50 new hires, fully operational 40% faster, far outweighs the temporary disruption. It's an investment in organizational capacity.
But what about the cost to the new grad? Because Yar himself highlights the severe cons of this fully in-person model. First, there's the literal financial cost.
The commute.
The commute. If you are on an entry-level salary, the cost of gas, vehicle maintenance, parking passes, or daily train tickets, that takes a very real, very painful bite out of your take-home pay. You are paying a premium just to show up to the training simulator.
The commute is a significant financial and temporal burden. I mean, it eats into your compensation and your free time.
And beyond the wallet, there's the psychological toll. Yar noted significantly higher burnout rates among these in-office juniors. And the reason why is fascinating to me. It wasn't the workload.
No, it wasn't.
It was the fact that they felt immense pressure to stay late simply because other people were still at their desks. It's the classic performance of presence.
Presenteeism. The idea that physical visibility equates to dedication, regardless of your actual output.
Right. If you are part of a high-volume hiring cohort where a company brings in 100 new grads at once, The competitive pressure is immense. You look around, and nobody wants to be the first person to stand up and leave at 5:00 p.m.
Oh, it would.
It creates a toxic cycle where people are sitting at their desks, exhausted, browsing the internet, just to ensure the manager sees their car in the parking lot when they leave.
Which is a fast track to burnout. It drains the exact energy and enthusiasm you hired them for in the first place. This is the central tension of the early career in-office experience. The technical and soft skill acceleration is entirely real, but the friction, the commute, the financial cost, the performative exhaustion is deeply punishing.
Which brings us to a really crucial question about what exactly you are absorbing in that office environment. If the office provides this magical osmosis, what is the actual substance of it? Because if we agree it's not just about typing speeds or coding syntax, what are the new grads actually soaking up that they can't get on a Zoom call?
They are absorbing how leadership handles absolute disaster.
Yes. Here is where we have to talk about the vacant morgue. This is easily the most striking anecdote in our source material.
It's an unforgettable image, honestly.
It really is. So, Joe Spisak, the CEO of Fulfill.com, started his fulfillment company when he was 25 years old. And because real estate is expensive, he started it in a literal vacant morgue.
Which strips away all the glamorous illusions of the modern startup. There are no ergonomic chairs or cold brew taps here.
No, he's working out of a morgue. And he openly admits he had zero mentors at the time and essentially no clue what he was doing. But, crucially, he was physically present when things exploded. He gives this incredible example of a Black Friday inventory disaster.
Oh, man.
Yeah. If you are a fulfillment company, Black Friday is your Super Bowl. Now imagine your client's entire Black Friday inventory gets catastrophically damaged. The stress levels in that room must have been suffocating.
It's the kind of high-stakes existential crisis that breaks inexperienced teams. The pressure is multi-directional, You have furious clients, panicking employees, and potentially devastating financial liabilities all colliding at once.
But Spisak points out that because he was physically there, he watched his warehouse manager handle that furious client in real time. He watched the exact words they used to de-escalate the situation.
Right.
And then he watched his CFO get on the phone to negotiate with a bank when they desperately needed capital to keep the lights on and expand. He says, point blank, you can't slack your way into those moments.
That phrase captures the limitation of asynchronous communication perfectly. You cannot slack your way into a crisis. When a disaster hits, leadership does not send out a calendar invite to the junior staff saying, please join this Zoom link to watch us panic and problem solve.
Exactly. The crisis just detonates around you. If you are remote, you might see the aftermath. You might get an email summary the next day saying, here is the new protocol. But you missed the messy, real-time negotiation. You missed the tone of voice the CFO used to project confidence to the bank while the warehouse was in total chaos.
Spisak refers to these as your graduate school moments, the moments of absolute unstructured chaos. And the value of being in the room for those moments is that it builds what we call business instincts.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Spisak uses an analogy to explain this that I think perfectly captures the remote early career dilemma. He says that doing remote work early in your career is like trying to learn how to cook by solely watching YouTube videos.
Let's stress test that analogy because it's deeply layered. If you watch a high-quality cooking tutorial on YouTube, you get the exact recipe. You get the precise measurements. You know you need 2 cups of flour and a teaspoon of salt. You can replicate the technical steps perfectly.
But Spisak is arguing that you don't develop the instincts. You might be following the recipe, but what happens when your specific stove runs hotter than the one in the video?
Right.
You don't know what it smells like when butter is perfectly browned versus when it has 3 seconds left before it burns and ruins the dish. You don't understand the underlying chemistry. You're just mimicking actions.
Instincts in any profession are essentially fast, unconscious pattern recognition. You only build accurate pattern recognition by being exposed to a massive volume of high-fidelity data points.
Okay, yeah.
In a business context, those data points are human reactions. It's the subtle shift in a client's posture when a price is quoted. It's the nervous energy in the room when a product launch fails. You simply cannot absorb those multidimensional data points through a compressed 2-dimensional video window or a text-based chat thread. The bandwidth of human interaction is too severely limited. You have to be in the room breathing the same stressed-out air to build the culinary instinct to save the sauce when it breaks.
But I want to make sure we aren't painting Spisak as some rigid traditionalist who demands everyone be chained to their desk from 9 to 5. He actually pushes back on that completely. He calls the 5-day-a-week mandatory in-office schedule outdated theater.
Which aligns perfectly with our earlier discussion about the toxic performance of presence. He recognizes that forcing people to sit in a chair just to be seen is counterproductive.
Right. He explicitly says he doesn't care if an employee decides to work from their couch on a Thursday as long as they were physically in the conference room on Tuesday when the team was mapping out the Q3 strategy.
It's about being strategic.
Exactly. The underlying lesson here is about the strategic deployment of your physical presence. It's not about being there all the time. It's about being there for the high leverage moments. Be there for the strategy mapping. Be there for the vacant morgue chaos. Because as Spisak warns, promotions and opportunities go to people who are trusted, and trust is built exponentially faster when you are visible during critical, high-stress moments.
His quote on this is pretty stark. He says, "Out of sight isn't just out of mind, it's out of consideration."
That is chilling. If you are a new grad banking on a fully remote role, that sentence should give you serious pause. It brings us directly to the reality of the fully remote path. If visibility is so incredibly vital, if missing the chaos means you are entirely out of consideration for advancement, is fully remote work just a complete career killer for someone in their 20s? Let's look at the actual reality, because there is a massive, undeniable upside to it.
We have to address the economics of geographic arbitrage.
Yes, let's bring Shaharyar back into the conversation. Amidst his data on how much faster in-office juniors learn, he also pointed out the immense financial leverage of remote work. He cited one of his best hires, a junior employee who works from a smaller city where the overall cost of living is roughly 35% lower than the company's headquarters.
Think about the math on that. If you accept a standard entry-level salary, let's say $60,000, and you are required to live in a major tech or financial hub, a huge percentage of that goes straight to exorbitant rent, premium groceries, and commuting costs.
Most of your paycheck, really.
Yeah, mostly gone. But if you take that exact same $60,000 salary and move to a city where rent is half the price, you have effectively given yourself a massive life-changing raise without taking on any extra work. You are bypassing the geographical tax of the modern economy.
Right.
For a young professional dealing with inflation and potentially student debt, that is an immediate, tangible benefit that cannot be easily dismissed.
It is an incredibly powerful financial strategy, but Yar is very clear that it comes with a hidden cost, visibility trap. At his own company, he tracked the progression of his staff and found that 2 of his remote juniors took twice as long to get promoted compared to their hybrid or in-office peers.
Wow.
Twice as long. Now, I have to ask, is that a failure of the remote workers for not making themselves seen, or is that a fundamental failure of the company's management structure?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, that is the exact pivot point of this entire debate. And it's where Muni Boga, the CEO of Kudos, provides a critical intervention in our understanding of remote dynamics. Boga argues vehemently that the problem isn't actually remote work itself. The problem is bad management relying heavily on proximity bias.
Proximity bias, meaning as a manager, I naturally favor and promote the people who are physically closest to me, simply because they are top of mind.
Precisely. It is a cognitive shortcut. It is easier to assess the engagement of the person sitting outside your office door than it is to dig into the digital output of someone 3 time zones away. Boga argues that early career professionals are inherently better or worse off with any single location arrangement. Their success hinges entirely on whether they are in an environment where managers consistently and systematically recognize contributions, regardless of where the work is performed.
Boga introduces a really important distinction here that we need to unpack: the difference between what we might call accidental visibility and systematic visibility.
Accidental visibility is the byproduct of the physical office. It's getting assigned to a highly visible, career-accelerating project because you happen to be heating up your lunch in the break room at the exact moment the senior director walked in looking for a quick volunteer.
It's completely reliant on geography and chance. It's the outdated theater accidentally working in your favor.
Exactly. It isn't meritocratic, it's opportunistic. Systematic visibility, on the other hand, requires deliberate organizational architecture. It means the company has structured, standardized ways to track, measure, and recognize distributed contributions.
Okay.
It means performance is evaluated by actual outputs, deliverables, and impact, rather than by who arrives earliest or who laughs the loudest at the CEO's jokes in the hallway.
Let's dig into the mechanics of that. How does a company actually build systematic visibility? Because it sounds great in theory, but in practice, how do you track output without turning into a dystopian micromanager tracking keystrokes?
It requires a fundamental shift in how goals are set and how communication is structured. Instead of measuring hours at the desk, a manager must define clear, measurable deliverables for the week. Like, I need this specific module coded, tested, and documented by Thursday at noon.
That makes sense.
Systematic visibility involves using centralized dashboards where progress is publicly visible to the team. It involves asynchronous updates, perhaps a brief, written daily recap of what was accomplished and where the roadblocks are, rather than an hour-long status meeting. Boga notes that in working with organizations across 140 countries, early career employees absolutely thrive in fully remote settings, but only when this specific management architecture is aggressively maintained.
And conversely, Boga points out the danger of the office. People can actually stagnate in a fully in-person environment if that recognition system is broken. If a manager simply assumes that because you're sitting at your desk for 9 hours a day, you must be performing at a high level, they might never actually scrutinize the quality of your output.
Presence does not equal performance. Relying on accidental visibility is a massive risk for both the employee and the employer.
So let's make this actionable. If you're listening to this right now and you are actively applying for jobs or evaluating offers, how do you navigate this landscape? How do you secure the financial benefits of geographic arbitrage without falling into the visibility trap where your career stalls for 2 years?
It requires you to completely change how you approach the interview process. When you are interviewing for a remote or hybrid role, you cannot just accept the standard answers about health benefits or the 401k match.
Right, those are given.
You must actively interview the hiring manager about their operational infrastructure. You have to ask direct questions like, how do you ensure distributed team members are acknowledged? Or, can you walk me through exactly how performance is measured and recognized for people you don't physically see every day?
That is fantastic advice. You are essentially auditing the management maturity. Don't just optimize your job search for a location. Optimize for an organization that has built a robust system for systematic recognition. If you ask that question and the manager stumbles, or if they offer a vague answer like, well, we just try to keep in touch on Slack and do a weekly Zoom sync, what should the candidate do?
You should run.
Yeah.
Because your career will absolutely stagnate in that environment.
Mm-hmm.
They haven't built the architecture for remote success. They are simply tolerating remote work because the labor market forced them to.
Right.
You need an employer who has deliberately engineered their culture for distributed impact.
All right, we spent a lot of time looking deeply at the employee's perspective, the friction between the osmosis of the office, the burnout of presenteeism, the financial lure of remote work, and the dangers of proximity bias. But let's look at this from the other side of the table.
Okay.
If I am an HR director tasked with high-volume hiring, say I need to onboard 50 recent grads this quarter, how am I designing these work models to actually keep these people? Because recruiting 50 people is incredibly expensive, but losing them 6 months later because of burnout or stagnation is catastrophic.
Retention is the ultimate metric that keeps talent acquisition executives awake at night. The cost of turnover in early career cohorts is staggering, not just in recruitment dollars, but in lost institutional knowledge and team momentum.
Let's go back to Shaharyar's data from Software House. When he was experimenting with these models, he found what appears to be a golden ratio for high-volume retention. By transitioning his teams to a hybrid model, specifically 3 days in the physical office and 2 days remote, his early career retention rate jumped from 65% to 88% over a 2-year period.
Going from a 65% retention rate to 88% in the notoriously fluid early career demographic is an astonishing operational achievement. It completely stabilizes the workforce.
Let's really break down the mechanics of why that specific 3-2 ratio seems to act as the perfect sweet spot for mass hiring early career talent. Why does it work so flawlessly?
Because it is a highly sophisticated structural compromise that directly addresses the two opposing psychological forces we've been dissecting. The 3 days in the office provide the necessary osmosis acceleration.
Yeah.
It forces the junior employee out of their comfort zone and exposes them to the vacant moored chaos.
Right.
It ensures they are present for the strategic meetings, it facilitates those low-friction shoulder taps, and it builds the baseline trust and business instincts required for long-term advancement. It satisfies the organizational need for cohesive culture.
And what role do the 2 remote days play?
They act as the critical pressure release valve. They provide the couch and sweatpants recovery time. Those 2 days completely mitigate the burnout risk caused by the toxic performance of presence. By legally mandating 2 days away from the office, the company essentially gives the employee permission to drop the performative aspect of their job. They get the high-intensity social and professional learning, followed immediately by deep, focused, unbothered execution time.
It's treating the corporate employee almost like a high-performance athlete. You schedule high-intensity interval training, the office days, followed by mandatory structured recovery days. It prevents the muscle from tearing entirely.
That is an excellent way to frame it. It manages cognitive load in a sustainable way.
But the physical schedule isn't the only lever HR departments are pulling to retain this high-volume talent. We have insights here from Christina Amiot, the president of Inform HR. She points out that early career candidates are landing roles faster and staying longer by targeting companies that offer something she specifically defines as human flexibility.
Human flexibility. I think that is a vital distinction from the generic term remote work. Remote work just describes a location. Human flexibility describes a philosophy of management.
Exactly. She defines it as the ability to manage the inevitable demands of simply being a human being. It's the freedom to step away for a mid-morning medical appointment or to run a necessary personal errand without facing the subtle retribution or side-eye that is so common in rigid in-person settings. It's an employer acknowledging that life does not pause between 9 and 5.
When an employer removes the punishment for living a normal life, they build an incredible reservoir of goodwill and loyalty. It shifts the entire psychological dynamic from a transactional, surveillance-based relationship, I am paying for 8 hours of your physical presence in this chair, to a mature, output-based partnership.
And when we talk about building loyalty to prevent turnover, Amiot drops an absolute bombshell statistic regarding specific perks. And to be clear, we have evolved far past the era of ping pong tables and free snacks in the break room.
Oh, definitely.
She notes that 86% of workers explicitly state they would commit to a company for a full 5 years in exchange for robust student loan repayment support.
5 years. In the context of the modern early career demographic, where job hopping every 18 months is practically the norm, a 5-year tenure is practically a lifetime commitment.
It's an eternity. But if you consider the immense psychological and financial weight of student loans on a 22-year-old entering the workforce right now, it makes perfect sense. It is a crushing burden that dictates their housing choices, their stress levels, and their overall quality of life.
Right.
If an employer steps in and says, we aren't just going to pay you a salary, we are going to actively help you dismantle this massive source of anxiety in your life, they are forging an almost unbreakable bond of loyalty.
It is the ultimate retention tool because it directly addresses the employee's core external stressors. Amiot also mentions the strategic use of summer Fridays, allowing employees to log off early on Fridays during the summer months. These policies are often dismissed as fluffy, nice-to-have perks, but high-volume employers are deploying these specific tools as calculated strategic burnout prevention mechanisms. They recognize that maintaining a 50-person cohort requires building a culture inherently designed for long-term, sustainable engagement.
It's a truly holistic approach to talent retention. It acknowledges that keeping an employee isn't just about where you place their desk. It's about how the entire organizational structure supports the life they're trying to build outside the four walls of the office.
Exactly. The most successful high-volume hiring programs view the employee as a complete ecosystem, not just a unit of productivity.
Okay, so let's synthesize this. Whether you optimize for the geographic arbitrage of a fully remote role, whether you land in the hybrid sweet spot, or whether you choose the rapid, high-pressure maturity of the fully in-office model, how do you ensure that the skills you acquire in this crucial first job actually travel with you? Because regardless of the retention strategies we just discussed, the statistical reality is that very few people stay at their first job forever. How do you extract maximum portable value from this experience?
This brings us to what is frankly the most critical concept for long-term career survival in our source material, and that's the necessity of building transferability.
Transferability. Let's bring in Andrew Lamb to explore this. Lamb is the founder of 4 Leaf Performance. He has led global teams for over 25 years, including 2 decades in leadership at HP, and he specifically coaches executives through extremely high-stakes transitions like corporate mergers and acquisitions.
This is a perspective we desperately need. Lamb is the person who looks at a newly merged, chaotic organization, evaluates the talent pool, and makes the hard decisions about who stays, who is let go, and who is promoted to lead the new structure. He observes the ultimate stress test of an employee's actual value to a business.
And his core argument is that in your early career, you should be obsessing less over where you sit and entirely over how quickly you can make yourself transferable. He defines a transferable employee as someone the business can seamlessly plug into entirely new priorities, new teams, or new crises without that employee breaking or requiring massive hand-holding.
This raises an important question, though. How does a 22-year-old new hire actually become that indispensable transferable person?
Lamb's answer is brilliantly simple. You become transferable by mastering the art of creating clarity. Specifically, he talks about the vital importance of turning tribal knowledge into simple, accessible, standard operating procedures, or SOPs.
We need to dissect the concept of tribal knowledge, because it is the silent killer of organizational efficiency, and it is rampant in almost every company. Tribal knowledge is the undocumented, informal way things actually get done. It's the reality that Bob in accounting is the only person who knows the specific formatting rules for the end-of-month report. But those rules only exist in Bob's head.
Right. If you don't ask Bob, you're out of luck.
Exactly. It's how a team navigates a clunky software platform using a series of workarounds that nobody ever wrote down.
And the massive risk is that when Bob takes a vacation, or when Bob leaves the company, or when a merger happens, that crucial operational knowledge simply vanishes into thin air. The process breaks. Lamb points out that the new graduates who survive these organizational earthquakes, the ones who keep their seats when a merger happens, are the ones who proactively take that chaotic tribal knowledge and document it.
They create the SOP. And Lamb is very specific about what that looks like. It's not a dense 50-page manual. It's a clear scoreboard. It explicitly defines the inputs required, the expected outputs, the specific owner of the task, and the hard due dates.
It sounds so incredibly basic. Writing down who does what and when, it borders on boring. Let's role-play this for a second. If I am a junior employee, how do I actually write an SOP for a messy process, like client onboarding, without stepping on the toes of the senior staff who've been doing it their way for 10 years?
That is the exact tightrope you have to walk. You don't walk in and dictate a new process. You act as an operational journalist. You interview the senior staff. You say, I want to make sure I'm supporting the team perfectly. Can I map out the steps you take to onboard a client just so I have a checklist to follow? You document their chaotic genius into a clean one-page plan. You organize the inputs, outputs, and owners. Suddenly, you have transformed invisible, fragile knowledge into a durable corporate asset.
This raises such an important question about the remote work dilemma we discussed earlier. If you are fully remote and you completely lack the proximity bias or the accidental visibility of the physical office, how do you advance? Lamb's framework provides the exact blueprint for remote survival. You advance by becoming the person who creates the clarity.
You become the organization's clarity generator.
Yes. If you are the remote worker who can sit quietly on a chaotic hour-long Zoom call where 5 different directors are arguing over strategy, and then 30 minutes later you circulate a crystal-clear one-page execution plan that defines the measurable 90-day priorities and who owns each step, you instantly become indispensable. It doesn't matter if you live in a different time zone. You are the cure for their confusion.
And as Lamb astutely points out, that specific skill, the ability to synthesize chaos into structured clarity, is the ultimate transferable asset. It travels to every single better, higher-paying job you will ever hold. Because every organization, from a startup morgue to a Fortune 500 tech giant, fundamentally suffers from internal confusion. If you are the reliable mechanism that generates clarity, you will always be in high demand.
It's a phenomenal strategy. But we can't talk about transferability and career paths without acknowledging a massive segment of the economy that operates outside the digital realm. Not every job can be synthesized into a one-page digital plan. We have to look at the power of physical networking and the mastery of physical trades.
This is a crucial counterweight to the dominant narrative that all future work is digital first.
Let's look at Ernie Bussel's experience. His career trajectory is wild and covers an incredible spectrum of work models. He started as a Navy petty officer responsible for handling nuclear missiles, which is obviously an exclusively in-person role.
Definitely in person.
Yeah. He then transitioned to becoming a teacher, then a top-producing sales professional, an operations leader, and finally the CEO of East Tennessee's #1 solar firm. He has seen the mechanics of success from every possible angle. And he shares a staggering statistic from his time in high-ticket sales. He was personally closing $4,500 per lead, while the industry average was hovering around just $2,500.
He was achieving nearly double the industry average in revenue generation. What was the differentiator?
He attributes it entirely to building profound trust face-to-face. He explicitly states that for standing out in a crowded job market and for closing complex, high-stakes deals, the fully in-person approach absolutely shines. He argues that remote applications and digital pitches simply get lost in the noise of a flooded inbox. But looking a skeptical client in the eye, shaking their hand, and demonstrating physical competence, that yields massive, measurable dividends that digital communication cannot replicate.
It highlights the absolute limitations of digital transferability. There is a depth of trust and a level of persuasive influence that can only be forged in shared physical space.
Bussell also noted that during his transition from the rigid structure of the Navy into the civilian education sector, he observed that early hires who operated fully remotely deeply struggled to grasp the nuanced team processes. They couldn't read the cultural undercurrents, which led to a high rate of turnover. They desperately needed that physical presence to anchor their understanding of how the team actually functioned.
And it isn't just about soft skills or sales trust. Some hard technical skills are inextricably bound to physical reality. Ryan Woodward, the CEO of National Technical Institute, makes this point brilliantly regarding the modern trades. He oversees the training for thousands of students entering high-demand, high-paying vocational fields, and he advocates for a very specific, evolved kind of hybrid model.
He talks about the necessity of pairing digital fluency with absolute physical mastery.
The modern trades have evolved dramatically. Employers today don't just need a traditional plumber with a wrench. They need a sophisticated technician who can navigate complex, proprietary smart home diagnostic software on an iPad, interpret the digital data, and then execute the complex physical repair on the plumbing system.
Woodward points out that if you want to secure employment and advance into the truly lucrative specialties like renewable energy installation, advanced HVAC, or commercial refrigeration, roles that easily start well over $62,000 a year, in-person experience, and physical mastery are completely non-negotiable.
Because the stakes are incredibly high. You have to master physical safety protocols. You have to develop the tactile instincts to handle the unexpected problem solving that happens the moment you open a complex machine on a chaotic job site.
Because, to put it as bluntly as possible, you cannot fix a broken, leaking commercial refrigerator over a Zoom call. It doesn't matter how great your SOP is or how clear your communication is. The digital world has a very hard, very unforgiving boundary where the physical world begins. And an enormous number of high-paying, secure jobs exist precisely at that intersection of digital diagnosis and physical execution.
It's a vital reminder that while the knowledge economy debates the merits of the couch versus the cubicle, a massive portion of our infrastructure relies on people who have mastered the physical world.
So what does this all mean? We have journeyed through an immense amount of data and perspective today. We explored the 40% learning acceleration through office osmosis. We looked at the irreplaceable value of witnessing leadership navigate the vacant morgue chaos. We examined the massive financial leverage of geographic arbitrage and the dangerous reality of the proximity bias visibility trap. We broke down the 3-2 hybrid sweet spot for retention, and we defined exactly how to become the ultimate transferable asset by generating operational clarity. Let's synthesize all of this into an ultimate playbook for you, the learner, as you look at your screen and evaluate those competing job offers.
The synthesis is that your location is a tool, and you must wield it deliberately. If you choose the fully remote path, you must maximize the financial leverage of your geography move to a location that affords you a significantly higher quality of life and lower financial stress. But concurrently, you must aggressively demand systematic recognition from your prospective employer. You must become the indispensable person who creates clarity out of digital chaos to ensure your visibility never fades.
If you choose the fully in-person offer, you are opting into a high-intensity training simulator. You will experience massive, rapid acceleration in your soft skills, your technical abilities, and your crucial business instincts. You will learn the unwritten rules of the industry incredibly fast. But you must actively and aggressively guard yourself against the toxic performance of presence. You have to set boundaries to mitigate the very real statistical risk of early burnout.
And if you are fortunate enough to find an organization offering a structured hybrid role, you have likely found the statistical sweet spot for both retention and balanced career growth. It perfectly pairs the necessary digital fluency and the crucial psychological recovery time of remote work with that all-important, irreplaceable physical exposure to the chaotic, complex reality of real-world problem-solving.
It is a profound strategic choice. You must choose your where with the exact same level of scrutiny and intention as you choose your what.
Before we wrap up this exploration, let's step back and connect all of these mechanics to a broader, perhaps slightly unsettling question about the future of work. We've established definitively today that physical presence builds essential business instincts through exposure to high-stakes, unpredictable chaos, those vital vacant morgue moments where you watch human beings react to pressure. But let's look at the technological horizon. As augmented reality, spatial computing, AI avatars, and hyper-immersive digital workspaces continue to rapidly evolve, will technology eventually be capable of perfectly simulating that exact vacant morgue chaos in a fully remote setting? Will we reach a point where we can digitally replicate the palpable, sweaty tension of a failing business deal or a supply chain collapse? Or is there a primal, biological, completely irreplaceable human instinct that only triggers when you are physically in the room, breathing the exact same stressed-out air as your boss?
Wow. That is an incredibly heavy, fascinating question to leave hanging. Are we fundamentally biological creatures that require shared physical stress to truly learn and adapt, or can we eventually digitize and simulate the chaos necessary for growth? That is definitely something for you to deeply mull over the next time you log into a sterile, orderly virtual meeting. I want to thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the high-volume hiring landscape and the realities of early career work models. We hope we've equipped you with the analytical tools to think deeply and strategically about exactly where you place your desk. Keep learning, keep questioning the baseline assumptions, and we will see you on the next deep dive.
This has been From Dorms to Desks, job hunting tips for those early in their careers, a podcast brought to you by College Recruiter job search site, which believes that every student and recent grad deserves a great career. Each episode, we dive into tips, tricks, and insights that will help you land your next part-time, seasonal, internship, or entry-level job. Subscribe to this podcast for free now, so you don't miss an episode, and visit www.collegerecruiter.com to find your next great job.